Welcome, Jet fans, to another episode of the Jets Life podcast. It's November 3rd, and we are a few days away from the Jets' Monday Night Football game against the Los Angeles Chargers. Before we get there, just wanted to touch base on some of the stuff that happened during the week. Obviously, we had the trade deadline on October 31st, Tuesday at 4 o'clock. That trade deadline came and gone without the Jets making any moves to improve the team. They did make a move the week prior where they sent McCole Hardman back to Kansas City. Um, Basically for a pick swap. I think the Jets got a sixth. Kansas City got our seventh. Um, you know, as far as that's concerned, I mean, there have been some reports that the Jets made a couple of inquiring phone calls to the Raiders regarding Devontae Adams and to Tampa Bay regarding Mike Evans. But the fact of the matter is, you know, as far as Tampa Bay's concerned, they're still technically in the hunt, being in kind of a weaker division. Any that division is really any for anyone to take. It probably goes to New Orleans. I think that they kind of make a little run here during throughout the rest of the season with Derek Carr back in the fold, and kind of seems like he's got his feet under him a little bit better than he did in the early part of the season. So I kind of expect New Orleans to come out of that division, but when you're one of these front offices and you're kind of going through the motions of what to do for the rest of the season, sending Mike Evans away is kind of throwing away your season because he's a big piece of what that offense is. I know they have Godwin over there too, and obviously Mike Evans' expiring contract at the end of the season is what kind of adds some fuel to the speculation that the Buccaneers might want to trade him. But again, I mean, these teams are in the business to win games, and sending Mike Evans elsewhere is not a move that's going to help win games. It's going to put you in the opposite direction. So that one was kind of a shock to me when I heard that. I mean, I know there was reports early in the year too, but once he started the season on the roster, it really didn't make much sense to kind of move him away, especially when they were winning games. Um, the other side of the coin, the Raiders, obviously, they did a full cleaning house a few hours after the trade deadline, getting rid of Josh McDaniels and firing their GM as well. Antonio Pierce gets his first game as a head coach against his former team, the Giants. Um, the Devontae Adams one is one that maybe had a little bit more of a possibility of happening. Obviously, his connection with Rodgers. If Rodgers does come back, that would have been a kind of a sure sign thing that was going to be a possibility. I do still think that in the offseason, keep an eye on the Jets to revisit that option. A lot can change. Raiders can get a top pick. Does he want to play with a rookie quarterback to the caliber of potentially Caleb Williams or Drake May? If the Raiders end up getting the second quarterback in the draft, um, I don't know necessarily that that's something that he would be overly interested in. He's kind of in that stage of his career where he's probably not in the full rebuild mode with a new quarterback coming into the fold, but I could be wrong. But I think that you know all signs kind of point to um, Devontae Adams eventually being traded to the Jets and reuniting with Aaron Rodgers. But mid-season, it really didn't make too much sense from the standpoint of Devontae Adams has a pretty hard contract to trade at the moment because he just signed that big contract extension last offseason. A lot of dead money would have followed with a trade. So, in order to kind of entice the Raiders to make a trade like that, it would have probably required a first round pick plus some instead of just kind of what we would expect eventually will cost a first round pick. And maybe not even that in the offseason. But for the Raiders to be able to take on a dead cap hit of that number, it would have required a large, a large payment in the form of draft capital in order for the Raiders to feel comfortable with moving what is right now seemingly their biggest star player on that offense. They've now benched Garoppolo for the rest of the season in what appears to be a full tank type of move. And you just got to feel bad for what Devontae Adams is going through. I mean, he went there with the expectation he was going to be playing with his old friend and his old college quarterback, Derek Carr. And after 1 year, Derek Carr's gone, Jimmy Garoppolo's in, and then obviously there's frustration with how that offense is being run. or was being run under Josh McDaniels, and midway through the season, McDaniels is gone. They're going to a backup quarterback, and it doesn't look good aesthetically. What's going on there in Las Vegas, but from their perspective, hopefully it's something that they can clean up. Because I mean, he's getting more and more disgruntled, and I think that's what eventually will lead to him kind of potentially forcing his way out. And what better way to force your way out than to reunite with Rodgers on a team that's kind of built to win a Super Bowl at this point? And he'd be, I mean, not that numbers are a reason to make a trade or not make a trade, but Garrett Wilson has said that he's going to go to number 5 next season, which will leave the number 17 open for obviously number 17 to eventually join the team if that's a trade that Jets explore and are able to accomplish next season. So obviously that's getting ahead of ourselves here, but yeah, I mean, not a lot of moves. I really didn't expect anything. Maybe I expected the Jets to, trade off Carl Lawson, trade off Dalvin Cook because there's been some, kind of what seems like from their press conferences just not being overly satisfied with their roles, and understandably so. Carl Lawson came in here a couple years ago, got a big contract from us, and was expected to be our elite pass rusher on one side of the ball. Unfortunately, in his first year with the team, he messed up his Achilles, missed his entire first season. His second season was a lot of recovery, but he did play some good football. And then this season, you had the emergence of Jermaine Johnson, Bryce Huff, JFM. There's just not enough snaps in a game to really kind of cycle through to give him a prominent role when you're trying to give your top edge rushers um, a large a large majority of the snaps, especially for players who are going to be here in future seasons. Fully expect at some point Carl Lawson is going to get into the fold, but as we stand right now, it's just been you're not seeing a lot of him on game day. He's been inactive for a couple of games this season, so that was a move I expected. Additionally, I did expect for the Jets to make an offensive line move. We were all kind of eyeing Ezra Cleveland from Minnesota, especially. Um, he had a good start to the season, but then got injured, and his replacement has come in and played well enough to where Ezra Cleveland kind of became um, someone that could be traded, and he ended up getting traded for a sixth round pick. For a sixth round pick, you would have kind of expected for the Jets to be in on a player like that, but for whatever reason, that didn't happen. But the Jets did go out there into the free agent market and bring in Roger Saffold, who is a two-time Pro Bowler, has had some good seasons, obviously. And with where the Jets stand right now on the interior offensive line, with all the injuries that they've had for the last few weeks, they definitely had to bring somebody in and bring in a veteran with experience at playing at a high level is something that really can potentially benefit this team moving forward. I obviously he has come off the streets, so where is he at from a game shape standpoint? That's something the Jets coaching staff is going to obviously figure out. That's why he's on the practice squad right now. But at some point in the season, I definitely expect, especially if these injuries keep piling up, he's going to get some game time sooner rather than later. But that's obviously what happened this week. Let's take a look forward into game week here. Obviously, the Jets are the primetime game on Monday Night Football. They'll play against the Chargers, and just a few matchups we want to kind of key in on. Obviously, the big one here is going to be Justin Herbert versus the Jets passing defense. Um, so obviously Justin Herbert, hasn't had the greatest start to the season. Kind of battled some injuries with the whole finger thing. But he's kind of gotten comfortable. The last game you were able to see he was able to kind of make his completions as he normally does, high completion percentage. I think he started the game with something crazy like 13 completions in a row or something like that. And he's kind of had a knack for that throughout his career. I mean, that seems to happen a lot for him, especially starting off. And he usually goes on a string of completions in a row. That's going to get a little tested here. mainly from a passing yards per game standpoint, the Jets do a really good job of holding their opposing quarterbacks to a limited standpoint in that, allowing 184 yards per game through the air. That's astounding. That's ranked fifth in the league, which we all expected. I mean, this is a returning secondary for the most part. The entire starting five going from the back end, and the emergence of Quincy Williams and um, I mean, obviously CJ Mosley, we know who he is, but emergence of Quincy Williams from the standpoint of being just overall just a top side linebacker there. I mean, it's just kind of incredible what he's done there, and that was a position group that I kind of had a lot of skepticism on a little bit. I kind of hoped that the Jets would bring in another linebacker. We had Quan last year. I was just kind of hoping the Jets would bring somebody else in to kind of challenge Quincy Williams a little bit, but there was obviously no challenge needed. He has come in this season, and I mean, this has been a kind of a um, gradual progression by Quincy Williams from the standpoint of he came in as a waiver wire acquisition from Jacksonville. Um, played played good in that first season. He definitely showed that impact player mentality. But he had a knack for overrunning plays, using his speed, kind of got him into some trouble. He was overrunning plays. The gap assignment wasn't always there for him. It was something that you saw as a area of improvement, but you definitely saw that there was something there. Um, and obviously, this coaching staff saw the same thing. Robert Saleh said on numerous occasions that the year the 49ers drafted Greenlaw, um, his job was to kind of find a day three linebacker that he thought he can develop, and he said Greenlaw was one, and Quincy Williams was another players that he wanted to bring in. So when Quincy Williams became available from Jacksonville, it kind of became a no brainer that the Jets would bring in a player that Robert Saleh had a lot of high praise for when the guy was coming out, and obviously that has developed into what we're seeing here. And I'll talk a little bit more about Quincy Williams in the next segment here. But obviously, from the passing standpoint, the biggest area I think the Jets really need to kind of hone in on. Obviously, the Chargers have gone through some injuries at the receiver core, um, but the Keenan Allen is the number one target by a large margin. I expect Sauce and DJ Reed to kind of be paired up with him at throughout the entire game, and with their coverage, I mean it's something that you can kind of see that that's an area where the Jets can kind of win on that one. You just wonder a little bit with DJ Reed's size and Keenan Allen's large frame. Is that something the Jets might kind of visit potentially? Roaming Sauce Gardner with with Keenan Allen because of his length. The Jets don't generally do that, but in this particular scenario, with how good that Herbert is, I mean, it's going to be something where that's an area where the Jets would definitely want to kind of consider um, potentially modifying their game plan a little bit to go there. But this is a team that the Jets got to come in with the pass rush. Got to come in with it frequently, as they normally do. Justin Herbert, when given time, he will dink and dime. He's a quarterback that doesn't show a lot of frustration. He's more than happy taking the 5 to 10 yards at a time. I mean, overall, this game is one I feel pretty confident with. But the area where I think that this game can kind of get lopsided is at the quarterback position. Obviously, Herbert is a much, much better quarterback than Zach Wilson at this point in his career. Um, so if this comes down to a situation where Herbert's doing what he wants to do and he's able to kind of sustain drives and operate the offense to the efficiency that he had against the Bears last week, it's something that can be really dangerous for this Jets team because one thing that this defense does a lot of is they get off the field pretty quickly. Third downs haven't been the greatest for them, but overall, especially in the second half, they kind of clamp down a little bit and are able to get opposing offenses off the field. It's not going to be as simple against Herbert when Herbert is being able to be given all the short yard situations. He's, like I said again, more than willing and more than happy to take those opportunities when they're there. I did mention I was going to kind of go into the linebackers a little bit more in depth here. and that's a big piece from why is the Austin Eckler in that Chargers screen game versus the Jets linebackers. We all know if you've watched the Jets enough, you kind of seen that the Jets kind of had their struggles, and it looks like they've gotten a little bit better actually. So I'm not going to say it's too much of an issue lately. They have definitely gotten a lot better, especially with Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley kind of dissecting the screen game a little bit better. You saw it on the last game versus the Giants. Those screen pass that even Quinnen Williams kind of got in front of, and Quincy Williams was able to break it up. So it's something the Jets have gotten a lot better at, kind of identifying those screen plays and holding them to limited yardage. But nonetheless, this is an area that the Chargers excel at, and we have had shown in history, at least in the early part of the season, of having struggles with. Austin Eckler, at this stage of his career, he's kind of been a little bit more, and he always has been more in the passing game, but he's obviously got the ability to take a pass play or a running play the distance on any given down. But I mean, you look at what he did in the last game: 7 receptions, 94 yards, 15 rushes, 2.9 yards. So he was effective, 29 yards. So he was effective in the passing game with those 7 catches. Not so much in the rushing game. I fully expect that the Jets are going to kind of stick with their kind of play of just kind of pulling offenses, but it's an area where there's going to be some concern here. Overall, the Chargers rushing yards per game, they're on the lower third of the league, or lower third of the league, with ranking 22nd, 103 yards per game, and the Jets shockingly, and I would say a lot of this has to do with the quarterbacks that they've gone against. Going up against rushing quarterbacks, they're able to get like 15 yards on a single rush, whatever. Obviously, can inflate this. They played Jalen Hurts, they played Josh Allen, they played Patrick Mahomes last week against the Giants. All that the Giants did was run for a majority of the game, but the Jets are allowing 144 yards per rush. Not an area that, not something that is going to be sustainable. That they're going to need to figure that out regardless of who they're playing against. And Herbert obviously with his athleticism kind of gives us that same issue we've had. Obviously not so much as going up against Jalen Hurts, but nonetheless, it's something you got to watch out for. So that the rushing defense for us against the Chargers rushing game, it's an area where we can kind of you know make an attempt to kind of bring that rush defense back up to normal, or try and kind of improve it for the season. But the Chargers are going to get yards somehow, and I think that a lot of it's going to come through the air. Um, but it's not going to be easy when you look at the overall landscape of what this game is. The Jets come in with a much more talented roster when you look at defense versus offense. But then on the opposite side of the ball, this game is obviously going to be kind of won or lost, in my opinion, on whether or not the Jets can limit those easy completions for Justin Herbert, and then what the Jets can do on the other side of the ball. Um, so obviously, I mean, those are the areas that I think the Jets really need to kind of eye in on or key in on when going up against the Chargers. But now we're going to move over on to the opposite side of the ball. So for as bad as the Chargers overall defense has been, they've actually been pretty good against the run. They rank 32nd in the pass. So that's probably got a lot to do with this. But they're allowing 93 yards rushing per game. And the Jets fall in the middle of the pack pretty much in a rushing yards per game from a offensive standpoint. Overall, they have 109 yards per game, which ranks 18th in the league. And this is an area with you know that we're finding ourselves, and I think we saw this in the Giants game last week. We're reaching that point in the season where you're going to start to see a lot more teams say, if we're going to lose to the Jets, we're going to lose to the Jets because Zach Wilson beat us. And you saw it last year in Jacksonville, or we were at home, but against Jacksonville, Jacksonville basically loaded the box and said, "Good luck running the football. Try to pass it." And unfortunately, in that game, Zach Wilson was way too far gone from a confidence standpoint. He had already been benched at that point, and then after an injury to Mike White, was kind of forced into the role again. Obviously, his head was not cleared enough. It was just a disaster that game. You know, it started off with a Quinn Williams sack. We had the ball at the 15-yard line, and even then couldn't muster anything. End up going 3 and out. Um, and that's a recipe I think we're going to see the rest of the way. Teams are going to load the box. One of our biggest game changers on offense is Brees Hall, and obviously we saw in the Giants game last week. It wasn't the run game. We were able to find him on a small pass. He caught it, made a move, and he was free and clear, able to run for a touchdown. Um, but teams understand that the way the Jets are going to beat you on offense is through two players. Through Brees Hall, it's through Garrett Wilson, and Garrett Wilson also had a monster game last week with 100 yards receiving. So, um, in order for Garrett Wilson to get the ball, Zach's got to pass it to him. So the Chargers. I fully expect are going to continue with that trend of what we saw with the Giants and try and load that box and not allow Brees Hall and this run game to kind of get moving. Because if you do, it's going to eventually lead to the key matchup of this game and a true area where you know not only this game but could be eventually like a large staple of what the season becomes. We're going against the Chargers. A loss to the Chargers ties us overall in the record standpoint at 4-4. We saw what happened yesterday. Pittsburgh Steelers won. That's three teams in that division that are all kind of well within playoff positioning. We have the Chargers would then own the tiebreaker. This is a game where things can really start to spiral. Zach hasn't played great throughout the season. He did have a great game-winning drive last week, but overall, that was a game that could have easily been lost. But this game, you're going against Chargers pass defense, which ranks 32nd in the league. They're allowing 297 yards per game against Zach Wilson, who's ranked 27th in the league at 191 yards per game. Something's got to give here. You got the worst pass defense in the league versus one of the lower ranking quarterbacks from a passing yard standpoint. It's truly going to come down to this area, in my opinion, is can the Jets exploit another team's weakness with a weakness of their own? Can Zach Wilson, kind of take that next step? We saw what he did against Kansas City on that Sunday Night Football game in the first week of October. Can he take that next step? Can he, you know, we're all saying that he's developing, he's maturing, he's progressing, but when you look at the overall standpoint of what he was last year versus what he is this year, it's not a huge enough growth where you can feel confident going into any game against any opponent, for that matter. And against the Chargers, who do have the ability to put points up on the board, it is really going to be kind of critical for Zach Wilson to kind of stay in his own lane and kind of stick with his guns here and make plays downfield. This secondary is not good. It is terrible, as stated by these passing yards. The area that from the passing standpoint, we do need to watch out for. Numbers aren't everything. You do have to watch out for the two playmakers on the outside, going up against this kind of weakened offensive line. Khalil Mack, who has 7 sacks on the season, 6 of those came in one game. But we all know from a track, he has a decent track record here of what he's been able to do as a pass rusher throughout his career. Got to watch out for him. He's a player that can definitely turn a game upside down if he's not blocked. And then Bosa on the other side, another player who's got a decent track record. We all know what to expect out of him. He has 4 sacks on the season, so that's an area. As bad as the Chargers' pass defense has been, that is an area where the Jets can be a little bit exploited. Obviously, outside of just Zach Wilson and his throwing capabilities, that Jets offensive line is kind of going through a little bit of a you know injury bug, just like last year. Just not as crazy. Makai stayed healthy and has been playing very well on the left side. Dwayne Brown's now coming back though. Wonder what they do here with Dwayne Brown. I know that before the season started, Robert Saleh was pretty into the fact that Dwayne Brown, when he's playing, he's gonna be left tackle. Is it something where with Mackay playing well, throughout the season that you kind of change that up and move him to the right side? Mackay did say in a press conference that he'd be fine playing the right side. He wants to play football after not playing it for 2 years. Respect that answer. But in the same sense, when you're doing something well, um, it is a little bit of a shocker there when you're being asked to then do something different, that maybe you're not comfortable with. And he has expressed his issues with playing on the right side in the past. There's been a report that a big part of the injury that happened last year was the fact that that he was being moved to the right side, and having the extra weight on that knee could have impacted the injury. Um, Regardless, it's something to keep an eye out for. But yeah, that's an area that I do definitely think that Jets need to watch out for. But at the end of the day, Zach Wilson just needs to sling this football. We saw what he did in that Giants game, the last 30 seconds of the game, 24 seconds of the game. He's got to um, play a little bit more like that and a lot less like what we saw in the first 59 minutes. I know the weather was terrible. I know there was a few passes dropped. Overall, the film didn't look as bad as the stat sheet looked when you watch the game over again. But again, it's kind of the nature of the beast. I mean, when you have a quarterback that doesn't show enough to complete passes down the field, when that pass gets completed, or when that pass is hit on line and it's dropped or whatever, it's more of a resounding impact of like, oh man, that was such a good throw. How do you not catch that? But when you look at a guy like Mahomes or Josh Allen, when passes are dropped, they just come back around a couple plays later and make the completion again. Obviously, drops are huge no matter what. But when you have a quarterback that's struggling, when he makes a perfect pass, you almost expect or hope that the guy on the other side has to make the catch. The same thing with Brees Hall. There was two instances. It was early in the game. It was I believe it was a third and short. He threw a little dump off pass to Brees Hall, who had it been a good pass, Brees Hall catches it and probably runs for about 10 to 15 yards. Later in the game, and I think it was in overtime actually. It was a second and 10 play, right before the Garrett Wilson completion. As I mean, I'm just kind of trying to piece it all together. I'm pretty sure that's the overall kind of when it happened. Similar pass, Zach Wilson going to his right, saw Brees Hall, dumped it off, hit Brees Hall right in the hands, and Brees Hall was looking upfield to kind of cut, didn't complete the catch, dropped it. So, you know, that's a situation where Zach made one bad throw, that was his fault. One good throw, it was dropped. In a situation, you know, if Pat Mahomes was doing that, or Josh Allen was doing that, or Herbert was doing that, the ball probably hits the receiver in the hands both times. And, one drop, 1 15-yard gain, it looks a lot better aesthetically as opposed to what we've been seeing. So, again, we all understand Zach Wilson is progressing. We all understand it's not as bad as last year, but we also do need to understand that that is not, you know, it's not it's not really like a gauging point comparing to last year. Last year was terrible. He got benched twice. There was a reason for that. Um, Him getting benched twice and comparing anything he's doing this season to a guy that did get benched twice last year, you're kind of just, you know, identifying that, it's not there's nothing there. But I have seen improvements. We're just not seeing enough. Right now, overall, as I mentioned earlier, is ranked 27th in passing yards per game. I think I saw something in total QBR. He's ranked 24, 25, somewhere in that ballpark. Really, the Jets, I mean, in order for the Jets to make any sort of splash this season, I mean, obviously they are 4-3, so they are winning games, um, and obviously on a 3-game winning streak. They are progressing in that direction, but in order for them to really make noise and go into a situation like Kansas City, go into a situation like Buffalo, who we play in 3 or 4 weeks, somewhere in that ballpark, go into a game against Miami, who we play in 3 weeks, and again a few weeks after that. in order to really stand a chance in any of these games, Zach Wilson really needs to play at a top 15 level. I mean, he really has to hit that point. I know that that's a huge ask to have him in that. You're basically telling him to kind of thrust his career forward. Um, but at some point or another, this team just cannot keep winning games by a score of 13-10. They're not going to win every game 22-16 like they did against Buffalo. This defense is elite. We all understand that, and they are going to hold opponents to minimal scoring. But what happens when they don't? We saw it against Dallas. Dallas ran away with it. We can't. I mean, if we really want to kind of make a run here and you know leave that potential door opening for Aaron Rodgers to return this season, it's going to require wins. And yes, this recipe is currently working. It's not sustainable. At some point or another, the defense is going to have a bad game. It's going to happen. It happens to every team. It just the Jets need Zach Wilson to grow up one step further. And against two bad opponents in back-to-back weeks, the Chargers and the Raiders next week, this is an area where you truly do expect and hope that Zach Wilson can take another step, take a step forward, and put the team on his back for once. Um, he did it for 30 seconds against the Giants, 24 seconds against the Giants, and obviously in overtime, getting us down the field. Um, Thanks in large part to a PI by Adoree Jackson. But got to give him a lot of credit for being courageous and standing in the pocket that game. We a big area where I will say he has improved on is I do not see the running away scared type of situation that we were seeing last year, where as soon as pressure came up the gut, he was running 15 yards um, backwards and throwing the ball 30 yards just to get back to the line of scrimmage. That kind of stuff was just, it was one of the most head scratching things that I think I'd ever seen from an NFL quarterback. And I'm a Jet fan. I've seen a lot of bad quarterback play. Um, but when we saw that and he was just doing that on a repetitive basis last year, I mean, I think we saw it a little bit early in the season from him, but not nearly enough as not nearly as much or even close to nearly as much as we were seeing it that last year. In fact, I've seen a couple of situations where he steps up in the pocket and runs outside. That is fine. If you're gonna step up and escape the pocket, that's one thing. But when you're going around the pass rusher and way back, all the way basically almost in your pylon, you're just setting yourself up for catastrophe. And how many times has he been sacked last year when he's done that? And all of a sudden it's second and 25 or something like that. Just not sustainable. He's progressing, but again, the progression needs to take another step. And what better opponent than the Chargers on Monday Night Football? He has played well in prime time. Had that good game against the Bills. We end up winning. Um, Obviously, that was a situation where he did throw an interception that game, but he was able to kind of stick in the moment and eventually lead a game tying touchdown drive. Um, just kind of keep progressing. Had Was able to get us the lead in that game against the Chiefs. That was a game where we were down 20-3, and he slowly got us back into it. A costly turnover late in the game, and then obviously we all understand what happened with the officiating in that game. Poor officiating on a what would have been an interception. The Jets were instead called for defensive holding, and that was history pretty much. Chargers were able to get a first. Sorry, the Chiefs were able to get a first down a couple plays after to ice the game. But again, we all see some improvement. Is it the improvement that we need? No, but it is something. And against the Chargers and their 32nd ranked passing defense, it's just something I think that we can potentially use that as an advantage for once, and hopefully Zach Wilson can kind of take his career to a different level now as someone who can beat opposing defenses when when he has the opportunity. Um, Again, I want to thank all you Jeff fans for joining this video. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel. All of your support is highly appreciated. Thank you and have a great day, and let's go Jets.